really to talk with the product teams, understand what's coming down the pipe, build relationships with them. Here at Concurrency, we're a big Microsoft partner, so it's really good to have connections when, hey, this lever doesn't work, how do I push it again? So that's kind of my focus, but bring a couple of engineers and architects out with us too, and we all sort of come up with what's cool. So this talk was also sponsored by Microsoft-ish, because they sent us some swag, and for the Season of AI set of talks to user groups. So I guess I have to talk about AI in the context of Microsoft. And they also gave us some swag. So there's like some stickers and some like stress cars and whatever in the back. So help yourself to that. I don't want to bring it home. I told Microsoft at Build I didn't want to fill my backpack with it because I had to check it back. So I did this all for you. So last year at Build 2023 was wow. It was Copilot for Teams, Copilot for Elephants, Copilot for Word. Everything was about Copilot. And I felt like, over the course of the next year, a lot of developers really struggled to figure out how to use this stuff to build meaningful apps. So if I were to just summarize Build 2024, I would say that it was Copilot with a focus on how the developers can actually bring this stuff to, the apps that you're building or the workflows that you need to solve, the problems that you need to solve. There's like 30 slides here of content. I should be able to get through all of it without getting everybody to sleep. But if you have any questions, like one of the most important parts about Build is just the engagement. So just raise your hand, ask a question if you want to, pry into it a little bit. I'm going to even prompt you guys as well. So number one thing for me, I think the big cool factor for me was that GPT 4.0 was released just a couple of weeks ago. Somebody else probably knows the exact date, but it was essentially available instantly on the Azure OpenAI service. And that was like really, really cool. So first off, like who's used like the GPT 4.0? Anybody who's been playing around with it? So what it is it's for the rest of you that maybe haven't played with it, the GPT like 4, 3.5, 4, what everybody's used to playing with, is mostly around like just language aspects of it. So feed it a prompt, get some information back. It's really good at that. With the 4.0, now you can start to feed it in images or have it generate images, audio, a bunch of different like file formats are supported. So what I did a little bit earlier today, this picture, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but I just fed it that picture, said, explain this to me. And it actually did OCR, all these little bits and pieces that were in there, interpreted what it thought that action meant. It was really, really close, and it's pretty amazing. So that was me. I took that picture at one of the Power to Automate demos, discussions, whatever. So 4 is available, or 4.0 is available. The one thing about it is it's expensive in terms of tokens, and it's also really heavily throttled. I want to say it's like 15 requests every 2 minutes, or maybe 5 requests every 2 minutes. Like you're not going to be able to use this to run a production workload, but you can certainly get your hands dirty and start playing with it. But I think that was really cool. Like, and the other part here too to understand is that this just really demonstrates how tight that partnership is between Microsoft and OpenAI. So the fact that they were able to release this like so quickly, where it's taken 6 to 8 weeks or something like that for them to release it before was really amazing. So another area that I thought that was interesting was that, again, this is all about focusing on bringing these AI workloads to the developers, is that we created a couple of different learning paths for the AI developer. And we're not talking like data engineers. We're not talking about like data scientists. We're talking about actual developers who need to consume these services in order to build apps with them. So they've got a couple of different credentials that are available, and a whole bunch of like plans that were turned on. I think they're adding a couple more like every week in the AI skill set. So learn.microsoft.com. Go check that out if you want to learn how to use it, and you'll get pretty much tutorials step by step to get you through this stuff. Other thing that I kind of ran into last year, I met this wonderful woman, Jacqueline, who's one of the PDMs, product managers for the Visual Studio, and I had a conversation with her. I'm like, tell me what's new, what's cool, what should I be pressing? And two things. One is that the Visual Studio has a new benefit on the MSDN site, which is up to $900 in credit to go to take any of the virtual events, or also go to VS Live. Anybody gone to VS Live? Anybody know what VS Live is? A couple people. VS Live is like the big developer conference. They do it 4 times a year. The last one was actually in Chicago, and then they got one coming up in Seattle in a month or so. But it's 3 days, hardcore, learn stuff, not like build, like you get to see booths and talk to people, but it's like 3 days of like learning sessions, pretty much back to back. I did ask her about like, are there any new plans to release a new Visual Studio? And she said, nope, there's nothing on the roadmap. They have no plans to do anything. There's been some talk about going into a single version. But the big impediment there is that, especially with Visual Studio proper, that enterprise organizations want to be very specific about versions being deployed through like Intune and whatnot. And so when they talk to some of their stakeholders, some of the companies that they partner with, they're like, no, we want to be in control of what version's out there in the wild. So it won't be like code where it just sort of updates, all the time. We don't see that happening anytime soon. But check out those benefits. That was kind of cool, $1,000 a year. GitHub, again, like just another cool way to be able to, be a creative developer, get quick answers. How many people are using GitHub Copilot? How many people want to use GitHub Copilot? Does anybody not know what GitHub Copilot is? So GitHub Copilot is essentially a ChatGPT embedded in your IDE. So you can ask it questions about it, just highlight the code and say, explain this to me, and it'll analyze it and tell you this function does some cross multiplication of a matrix or something like that, right? So the GitHub extensions that they added are allowing you to be able to prompt that extension by saying like at Azure, how do I deploy an app service? And then it'll give you an answer through that agent. And so other companies are creating these agents like Red Hat and I can't think of these, but Octopus Deploy and Pinecone and all these other different you could create your own GitHub extension to answer questions that would be relevant for a developer that's working in something that you might be building. So maybe you're building a UI library for Blazor or something like that. You want to create an extension so that they can ask questions really quickly. So that was a pretty cool feature. Before I move on, this just kind of demonstrates to me like the amount of extensibility that they're building into all the Copilot features, right? You see this happening in the M365 Copilots, in other areas as well. And nothing shaking over there. But yeah, no, it's really showing a lot of extensibility for developers to be able to integrate into these different Copilots. I thought this was really cool too. Everybody in here uses Microsoft Teams mostly. Everybody's kind of familiar with it. Your company uses it. This is really cool watching, somebody just pass a link to a code file in a repo, and it pops up and gives you kind of the context of it as, sort of like a little card. So again, just another way that the developer is kind of being elevated to a first-class citizen through the Microsoft stack. And I thought that was really kind of cool. So as you start to dive into this a little bit, VS Code released a new extension. It's in preview, and I couldn't get it to work for myself. There's some like prerequisites to get like WSL set up and the right versions of VS Code and all the different things. So I didn't quite have enough time to get that up and running. But this is going to make your life really easy. So with this toolkit, you're going to be able to have a model catalog, so you can pull down different models either through the Microsoft catalog, or also it supports like Hugging Face. So Hugging Face is like an open source library of AI models. It has a model playground, so you can start playing around with these things, get them kind of side loaded, and like start throwing like prompts against them. And then it'll help you do some of the fine tuning, techniques with that as well. A couple of cool features about deployment is that you can one-click deploy directly to an ACA or Kubernetes, it supports Onyx and DirectML as well. So, like with other kind of niche development stuff in VS Code, I usually find some pretty cool extensions that make working with them pretty easy. Paul here and I used to use the Azure BSC plugin. They're gonna scrim us. But just to make it kind of easy working with something you're not quite as familiar with. So check that out. And then this is one of my like, oh, this is really neat. This is really going to help out a lot. For those of you that have used OpenAI and started to like open it up to like other people through APIs, it gets pretty pricey pretty quickly. And so there's a lot of, you kind of have to manually manage like how many requests, if you're going to throttle it, how you're going to, what are you going to do it? But API management in Azure now has a couple of custom policies. I should say not custom policies, but now they're native policies that you can use to configure and do token throttling, load balancing across multiple OpenAI instances. You've got there's like three different policies that they've demoed there, and I thought that was really cool, like to be able to bring that in. The other thing too is that, as you can see right here on the picture, it's native API management natively supports the OpenAI service. So in Azure, in your Azure portal, all you have to do is like open up, connect to an OpenAI service, knows which one you have, and it takes care of all that messiness of setting up that API endpoint and any security that's needed for that as well. So that was really cool. Oh yeah, token limit policy. There's another policy that sets up like an emit capture, so you can like log and get the telemetry for like what subscriber ID, IP address this came from, stuff like that. Like I mentioned, they got the load balancer in there as well. And then it also has a semantic caching policy as well. And so what semantic caching policy would do is, let's say like you prompt like you prompt your API with a specific question, tell me who was the first president of the United States, and then somebody changes one word, like, who's the original president of the United States, it will actually do a semantic cache on that, and it'll know that that question is essentially the same thing. And rather than hitting your tokens again, it will pull that response up from your response cache. So another way to kind of like control how much these services are costing. Anybody using the OpenAI service in any kind of production capacity? Not yet. I've seen people get a $50,000 bill in a month, yeah. So like people are very particular about this, right? You don't want to have that happen by mistake. So these are just some good strategies to be able to maintain and control those costs in Haydin. So .NET 9, it's in preview. The 4th edition of the preview was released at Build. So kind of a couple of key things that I wanted to go through with what was talked about. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that the release date's coming up in November. I'm sure that our esteemed user group is going to have something special going on for that. So November 12th to the 14th, roughly in that time frame, we'll have some events to commemorate the release of .NET 9. No surprise, there's a whole bunch of AI stuff that's coming out. But there's something that happened at Build where I was walking around and I saw this like booth that said .NET Aspire, and I was like, I don't know what that is. I haven't been programming for a long time, so I'm wondering to myself, I just losing track? Am I like losing my mojo? Anybody heard of Aspire yet? A couple of you? It's really cool. I got a couple sites on it. But we'll talk a little bit about that. I walked up to him and I said, like, I have no idea what this booth is. Like, what is Aspire? And they explained it to me, and I think it's pretty cool. And then MongoDB provider for EF Core, I thought that's really kind of money to me. I know a lot of companies are using MongoDB instead of Cosmos, and it's been kind of a contentious battle to get customers to consider one or the other if they're already on the MongoDB. So this is just another way to open that community up a little bit and do development pretty natively like you would be with EF in the other data stacks. So one thing I might not, maybe I'm supposed to, maybe I'm not supposed to talk about. But I'm not under an NDA with a conversation I had at Build, so I'm gonna go ahead and tell you because I was told it was supposed to be like officially released this week. Maybe by Tuesday, definitely by Thursday. Somebody will reach out and let me talk about it. But I have the slides, so let's do it. OpenAI has a new SDK that's coming out, essentially allowing you to be able to use OpenAI pretty easily within the .NET stack. Just create an instance of it. And so I did find some stuff on the Microsoft developer blog, kind of buried, but so I think I can talk about it. But if not, we'll just cut this out of the recording.
It's not live at all.
It's not live.
About to get $50,000.
So this conversation actually led to something really cool. He was asking me, he's like, as a developer, and maybe I'll just pull you guys and get back to him, but as a developer, we've got these different models that we would use, and each one of them are kind of coming up with their own SDKs, and the way that you interact with the models, the parameters that you would pass to them, the ways that you would control the prompts are all slightly different. And so he was like, would you rather have a generic kind of implementation class that could handle GPT versus, the other, frameworks? Or do you want to have that programmatic control so you're not passing like JSON, like, parameters to it? I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think? you have to learn, like on the one hand, you have to learn a new class every time that a new type of model comes out. Maybe when GPT-5 comes out, it's gonna be totally different. So any thoughts? One class to rule them all?
Probably not. It'd probably be nicer to have the fine grained control of whatever you're really ratcheting down on it for. If you're actually gonna use, that particular AI model for something, then it'd be nicer to be able to do exactly what that thing does well, rather than more generically do it.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think my answer to him was things are changing too fast for me to trust you to be able to predict what to put in there. So I would rather have it be, relatively specific so that it's at least type safe. But anyway, you can do all the fun, cool wizardry stuff in GPT-4 through a library SDK now with really simple, it's really easy to follow. So another thing that I thought was, I actually didn't see anything about this at Bill specifically. I didn't talk to anybody about it. When I was looking through the book of news, I came across this. So these are essentially like laser controls that are going to support AI models essentially. So what you're seeing on the screen is a smart paste. So I get this form field with a first last name and an address, and I go into an email. He's going into the email, copying and pasting it, and then he's got a smart paste button which takes the information that's sitting in your clipboard, runs it through an LLM, and then populates the form fields. Sick, right? Like that's really cool. So the smart text area is kind of like giving you that autofill, predicting the words that you're actually trying to say, which is really nice. The smart comma box is using kind of the semantics to figure out what you might want to put into the dropdown, right? So autocomplete for a comma box. And then the other thing that was kind of cool is this vocal embeddings. So there was, this is another feature that's being released where you can essentially like create your own embeddings in memory and then run that so that it's not actually hitting an external service. And this is a small example that was up here. Oh, wait, no, I didn't put that example up here. But there's a small example in the book of news where you could load up like maybe some rows from a database, for animals, right, or something like that, and then ask the user for a prompt, and you can, essentially get a semantic similarity from that list of items that you preloaded, and I thought that was actually. So .NET Aspire, I really had a hard time understanding it with these guys. Like he was trying to show it to me, and I'm like, isn't this just like Unity? Like, and he's like, no. It's like you get all this other stuff, like, and I'm like, yeah, but you're just sort of like, building your dependencies and making it sort of easier to do this. It's like, no, it's totally different. But at the end of the day, it's just like Unity. So a little bit more than that, right? So it actually like orchestrates the entire app ecosystem. So you might have a host application you want to get launched, and then you've got these different APIs and different service layers that you need to kind of connect and tell it who can talk to what, right? So like your API, you want to be able to load up Redis, and you don't want that in this other library that you have as part of your project. You use this to sort of do, get all that kind of stuff configured. The other thing it kind of helps with is your connection stream management as well. Kind of simplifies that as well. So you don't necessarily have to wire up all your key vault, and all that kind of stuff the way you used to do it. So just a different approach to it. But to me, I even looked at it, for a couple hours afterwards, and it was like, it's pretty much just Unity. So, but with a little bit more power to it. Like, your entire application is basically orchestrated through how you configure it. There's some quick start templates that I saw online. They give you like basically hello world and a simple web application. And then the other thing that, I don't know, I didn't put up here on the slide, but it also facilitates the deployment as well. So it makes it a little bit easier to deploy with computers. So I checked that out. All right, so another thing I really didn't want to get lost on was over the course of the last 5 or 10 years, have pretty much built like line of business applications that are mostly hosted on some intranet or maybe even a public website. Forms over data type of stuff, right? I haven't done a lot of like device native development. We've done it here, concurrency, with IoT. Not really a lot with like building a Windows app necessarily, but this was really cool. So everybody's heard of LLMs, large language models, but SLMs, like small language models, reduce the number of parameters, which reduces the size of the actual model. So like something like OpenAI's GPT-4, you couldn't physically put that onto your workstation. You couldn't even physically put it onto a hard drive the size of this room. I mean, essentially, if you want to think of it that way, they're so massive in scale. But these small language models perform good enough to do a lot of the common things that you would want them to do. So like Phi is the one that Microsoft's pushing right now for the native development. And it's a 3.3 billion parameter ML. I mean, it's a pretty good sized model. And that can run, deploy direct to your machine and give you a lot of the capabilities that you might expect out of a Copilot, especially when you start using like RAG techniques to augment, some of the data that you're specifically looking for. They're embedding the Windows Copilot runtime into Windows, so this can allow you to basically infuse your applications with Copilot. And you kind of mentioned semantic index here in terms of Windows semantic index. But I'm kind of missing something in this part of the conversation that addressed it on the last slide. Literally was the slide I forgot, right? Like everything after I did this, I forgot. But having the Windows Copilot library and the Copilot runtime is going to give you access to the graph and all the information that is kind of aggregated for a specific person that's interacting with it. And then they're also going to give you access to some of the 40 SLMs that are going to be deployed on Windows devices with the Windows Copilot Plus PC. And that demos that I saw that were basically, if you watch the keynote where he was talking about going into a paint and sort of like sketching a cat and then it drew like a Van Gogh looking cat. Like that's all the AI type of stuff that you can do with some of these different models. So studio effects, you can do live translation, live caption translations. I was watching a demo of that where there was a woman who was Thai, whatever language it is that they speak, and I was speaking in my wife's native tongue, and the captions were just in English, so we could understand what each other was saying. It was pretty cool. Windows Recall, the recall stuff is basically recording a user's events through time, and then through natural language, you're able to kind of roll them back to, hey, I want to go back to my Excel document that I was editing on Tuesday at 10 p.m. So that's a cool feature that's coming up. And then from the building the native application, there's a lot of like just processor type of stuff, improvements they did. DirectML supporting quantization, Onyx runtime, WebNN. These are all like stuff that have more to do with like being efficient in running these models. The big thing is that the Copilot PCs are going to come with NPUs built into them, which really speed things up. So, anybody know what Copilot Plus PC is? One person. Anybody else know what Copilot Plus PC is?
I have suspicions.
The next version of the Microsoft Surfaces are going to be Copilot Plus PCs. They'll be out in July. I can't wait to get them. In the keynote, Satya or somebody had transitioned to like a recording where it was like the story was like a guy was trying to play Minecraft because his son plays Minecraft, and but he doesn't know anything about this. And so he's like at the PC and he's like, "Hey, Copilot, can you tell me what I'm supposed to do here?" And it's like, wow, it's capturing the screen in real time and it's saying, well, it looks like you're playing Minecraft. It's a game where you create new things. So what am I supposed to do? Well, I think you're supposed to go create a sword so you can defend yourself. Well, how do I do that? And it walks him through all the different steps. It even sees like the components that he needs to build it on the screen. He's like, go over there. Dude turns around, there's a zombie running after him, and he's like, whoa, what am I supposed to do? He's like, get out of there. So it was really cool. But on those Copilot PCs, that's where the closed captioning was between the multiple languages, between different speakers was happening. And so the device itself is optimized to be able to run this. And when Windows is deployed, the new version of Windows, which they never said there would be a new version of Windows after 11, but it'll have all that support of it. So we talked about the 40 different SLMs that are going to be deployed to it. That was pretty cool. Like those are, I really want one. I really want one. Tab.
Put it in the budget.
Put it in the budget. So I didn't get a chance to play with this. I tried to turn this on, and I didn't get very far without my IT department. But Copilot is available now in the Azure portal for everybody. If you're working for a company like me that has this on lockdown, maybe you'll have to ask permission. But essentially you can ask it, how many resources do I have that are inactive? How do I deploy app service? Or here's, help me edit this YAML file for some sort of APS deployment. And it can give you those, like basically GitHub Copilot kind of answers right there inside Azure. And apparently it's free as long as the preview. So you should have at least a good 4 to 6 months to play with it. I've been going really fast. Any questions about what I've talked about so far? All right. Cost-effective retrieval at scale with Azure Search. So Azure Search has been shown to be a really effective tool for doing RAG against LLMs. It performs really, really well, but it gets really, really pricey. And it also has some limitations in terms of scale. So they did quite a bit to make it a little bit more cost effective, and also expanded the size of these search indexes to be able to support like these massive like RAG requirements, like large libraries of documents that might have a lot of vector components to it. So it does support quantization, which is essentially taking the resolution from like a 32-bit like resolution down to an 8-bit in terms of like the vector search relevancy. So it makes it a lot more effective, and it doesn't meaningfully decrease the performance of your LLM, at least in most use cases, in general purpose use cases. So that's something if you're kind of struggling with controlling the costs, you might want to look into some of the features that are coming out. Because Azure AI Search did get a little bit pricey for some of our customers. AI studios. So there's the OpenAI studio, there's the ML studio, now there's the AI studio. One of the product managers said eventually over time everything's going to kind of converge, so you won't have to go to one place to work with speech to text and custom ML. You won't have to go use this resource if you want to bring in Hugging Face models. It's all just going to kind of go into the hub. I actually did deploy that today, and was able to get that up and running. And it's pretty nice in terms of being able to like capture everything in one single ecosystem. It knew about the resource that I got connected for the last time I did a talk about AI, so it was pretty cool. You are going to get first class like developer kind of support in terms of all the different features you would expect as a developer. You'll be able to hit that model catalog with models as like calling this like models as a service now. Prompt flow, all this stuff is like built into the AI studio. Last two, tracing, debugging, monitoring. I saw a couple of demos on that, and that was pretty cool. Like you could see the telemetry, and look for anomalies where some models would perform poorly based on the same request. So there's a lot of, I haven't explored anything here, but so far it looks good. And like other services, it seems to all be converging in one single spot. Okay, any other program developers? I think that was it for the developer stuff, like the hardcore like developer stuff. Power Platform. This was my one. Remember when I said last year was really wow with the Copilot stuff? I mean, I was just completely blown away by it. I wasn't really blown away by anything I saw in the keynotes, and even the first day, I wasn't really blown away. I had to go talk to the Power Platform team because some of our developers wanted some questions answered about when's this feature going to be GA. And they're like, well, if you want to use this feature, you should go see this talk, and then you can talk to the person that does it. They can give you access. So I went to this talk, and it was really talking about process automation and how the Gen AI is going to be incorporated into Power Automate. And so before I do that, I wanted to distinguish between cloud flows and desktop flows, if you aren't familiar with that. So cloud flow would basically be anything where I don't have to touch an application physically, and I can just use maybe API calls or some other communication protocol to send information back and forth between the system to automate a workflow process. I want to pay somebody in ADP, there's APIs for that. I can just send that right across the wire. But if I'm a legacy company and I've got an AS400, everybody here know what an AS400 is? Anybody not know what an AS400 is? It's okay, because there were people at Microsoft that didn't know what an AS400 was, at that station. So anyway, it's an old mainframe system, and most of those systems run on-premise and have desktop applications that you can't really access. So in order to automate some of those things, you have to do an unattended, type of workflow where it records what you're doing on the screen and then it plays it back and pushes the buttons for you in an automated fashion. The new AI recorder, though, is going to be easier to use because it's like a show and tell. So you turn it on and it listens to your microphone as you explain, I'm going over here to click this button, feeding it this information, and it then starts to record it. So that was a really cool demo that I saw. And the other thing I really liked about it is that the product manager, if you've used like desktop automation tools like UiPath or even the desktop flows in Power Automate, the one thing about it is kind of fragile. So if software release comes out and the screen changes, it doesn't know how to find that new button or find the button that's located in a different spot. The desktop flows are going to be self-healing. And she actually showed me a demo on her phone. It wasn't something we saw it build, but show me like a video on her phone where somebody had a calculator and was supposed to type in like, math equation. And I think like somebody like scratched out the 7, or something, and or changed the numbers around. And it realized it, like the desktop flow realized, hey, I was supposed to press this button 7, but it's not where I expected it to be. But I did find a 7 on the screen, which let me push that button instead. And so literally without changing, like going in to configure anything, just asked a question, she clicked the button, yes, and it updated the UI automation. And I thought that was mind blowing. But the one that I thought like really blew my mind was creating these workflow automations in Power Automate. So these are your cloud flows. So set the stage. I think this one was recorded, so you'd be able to see it. But step 1, define the problem. He started out by saying, I'm not gonna type this on the screen. It's like 2,000 words. It'd be really hard to do. So he had it like in an notepad. But the definition of the problem was that I am a claims processing company for auto claims. And through this process, I want you to auto approve anything that's under $1,000 or $1,000 and less. And then I had some other business rules to break it down, like only $500 could be used for like manual labor, and $300 for parts, and $200 for this. And oh, by the way, I have a list of people that are bad. They frauded us before, and I don't want you to use them anymore. So this is what he did. He typed that all up into the prompt, and he said, build me a workflow. And all it did is come up with this screen with like, hey, you want to change some of these input values? You want to change some of these output values? And instead of like referencing the exact file, he just changed it into a parameterization, so that it was like, use the file that's loaded up here. And here it's loaded up in the references section where it's like using that document as the blueprint of how to answer this question. So like literally built this pretty complex workflow in Power Automate using nothing but natural language and a couple minutes of configuration. I think this is like a game changer. I've used Power Automate, a few times. I know we have some Power Apps developers in the room. But to be able to do some of this like more complex workloads is going to make your jobs really easy when you figure out how to use it. But it's also going to let like business users be able to use it the way that the Power Platform is really designed for, right? So I think this is really powerful. Step 3, run it. Other things. So there's a lot of agent stuff that's happening. A lot of these co-pilot like answer questions around my documents. So we've got a couple of slides here. So building custom co-pilots is pretty easy. You can automate like a lot of long running like business processes. This is just being like, what this is kind of talking about is describe what problem you want to solve here. And then it's going to start walking you through all the different steps that you need to solve that problem. So instead of dragging and dropping all the workflow elements, you just sort of talk to it, and it starts adding the steps for you. This isn't super new, because I used this to do some automation a couple months ago for this nonprofit I'm part of. But a lot more support here, and you can just new features and new plugins that are available for you to be able to do stuff with. New Copilot extensions and connectors. So all this extensibility is starting to pay off now. You're able to connect to like Dataverse, which was previewed a couple of months ago, maybe November, right? So that's coming out. You can connect to Fabric now through your Power Automate, and then a bunch of other like new connectors like Jira and whatever else are coming out. So this extensibility is like really like expanding the ecosystem, what you can do in the Power Platform. I didn't like this, but I loved it. So you can basically go to any SharePoint site, click on a list of documents, and convert this to a co-pilot, meaning a chat, right? And then just sort of like expose it through Teams. I can see this being abused by organizations everywhere to the point where there's going to be 10,000 concurrency chats feeding off 2 documents dug into some obsolete, obscure, place. But I thought it was pretty cool, right? So like simple stuff like I want to create an HR thing. Maybe I got a special client that has a bunch of requirements things, and so it is pretty cool. But I could see this being a lot of sprawl, Fabric, another big topic. Last year at Build, Fabric was announced. I expected a lot of things to come out on Fabric because it wasn't even like GA'd until November, I think, of this year. So I was expecting there to be quite a bit. There wasn't a tremendous amount, but the one that was immediately relevant to me with some of the clients that I'm working with. And that is the real-time intelligent data processing. So think IoT data through like a data stream coming in. That was not really possible with Fabric. I mean, technically it still isn't because it's only in preview, but it wasn't possible. And I've had customers like, well, we want to be able to build these Power BI dashboards and these analytics process like streaming data. And the best you could really get was like refreshes of 48 times a day or something like that. So this is going to be like literally real time. And be able to build that same analytic experience that you got in real time in Power BI, but using the Fabric ecosystem to do it. That was like the big game change thing for Fabric. And I don't think they really, they talked about it in the keynote, but it wasn't really pushed like it.
Well, what's Fabric in the first place? For those of us that missed it last year.
Thank you. Okay.
Is it like a data lake? Data swamp?
It's everything. So, okay, so if you read the tea leaves, okay, well, all right, let me take a step back. Fabric, what is it? If you need to build a robust enterprise data warehouse, what are all the things you have to do in Azure in order to get that up and running? You have to create a data lake. You have blob storages, you've got data factory, you've got networking components that you have to isolate, VNets and peer-to-peer networks, lock it all down. Now we haven't even gotten into the transformations to create a synapse, right? And you've got to build out your purview for governance. All this stuff that you have to build. Each of those are individual components. And every one of them are consumptive-based, meaning that you're paying for the stuff, right? Fabric puts this all into a single SKU. So everything that you deploy in Fabric is on a Fabric capacity unit. Yeah, don't ask me what it is.
Look, I had Xbox. I remember the Xbox bucks. What were they called?
Points.
So Xbox points, right? Where you
Yeah.
you couldn't I give you $10, you give me 800 points, and it never kind of evened out zeros.
Yeah.
Right? They've been doing it forever.
So anyway, it is an analytics as a service platform. Is really what it amounts to. It's a SaaS service for a data warehouse, and it's built for everybody across the entire tech stack, from the network engineers all the way up to the business users that are going to be building Power BI reports. But it did take a Power BI user-centric vision in terms of how it was implemented. So somebody who's a Power BI developer can create their own data factory components pretty easily and have access to the things they have access to. It strongly encourages and enforces things like data domains and data ownership. So these kinds of robust data and analytics and data warehouse features that you would normally build, this is all part of the ecosystem from the ground floor. It's the best way to say it. But like I said, it was stuck in some of that legacy world of synapse, refresh rates, and building cubes, and all that kind of stuff. So the real-time intelligence didn't really show up there. The one thing that really wowed me was this bullet point here about monitoring and detecting patterns and anomalies. And there was a stream of data that was coming through, and that was like, blip, there's a problem, right? Well, you can capture that blip, there's a problem, and create a Power Automate flow to automatically kick that thing off and do something with it. So maybe it was a sensor out on the factory floor that went, blip, and you can perform some action to reset that machine or whatever else. I thought that was pretty cool. Not only being able to tie it to an automation, but also to within just a click, go create an automation and do this thing, right? So, so that was very cool. A lot of synergy in the ecosystem. Being able to do, this AI stuff everywhere is pretty cool.
So they're just always watching. So you're always looking at all the data coming through your system all the time, everywhere. So you always have
This, yes,
the
if you set
fabric
this
is,
up.
so you always have that. So then you have even more inputs for your AI stuff to always have even more stuff to look at, right?
More AI.
More AI, more of the time.
They're starting to do a lot of this in the manufacturing space. I was just tech on TAP's industrial automation event last week. Basically anything that they can put a sensor on that feeds into AI, they're doing now. And I saw 4 different solutions where it's the same thing, where they're just hammering it through. That way it's almost, they're trying to make it human proof, where we're not capable of screwing up in an industrial environment.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the goal.
I did kind of gloss over this capacity unit thing. Fabric is not entirely a shared compute space. Or it is a shared compute space, right? So you reserve a capacity, which is basically your peak of how much data you want to be able to process at a certain time. So essentially you'll get throttled if you exceed that, is what it amounts to. And then there's the co-pilot features that require you to have a certain level, is what it amounts to. But you don't pay for all those different services. You don't pay for data throughput, egress, and ingress. You're paying for the capacity, the compute capacity. And the point that I was going to make before is that if over the last 6 months you've been watching the features that have been rolling out to the native data components like Data Factory, Synapse, Purview, they're being rolled out into the fabric twin of the service and not into the native service. So read into it what you want, but I'd say that everybody's going to be a fabric user at some point. Another thing that was really cool, again, super relevant, external data sharing. So you no longer have to ship your lakehouse to your clients. You can share it to an external user, to external identities and external sources. Right now, it's only enabled for lakehouses in your K-12 databases, not for the entire ecosystem. But that I thought was really cool, like being able to share, like, hey, Mr. Client, here's your data, you can share. But it maintains your lakehouse as the source of truth.
It's a third-party cybersecurity nightmare.
Could be, right? But cross-tenant data, like sharing. All right, random thoughts. These are the things 20 minutes before I had to wrap this up. I don't think it did justice to like semantic kernel. It wasn't like a huge focus, but it comes into play with like building these like .NET agents and stuff like that. The semantic kernel is a framework that allows you access to like the graph that connects like individuals' data. So like we Copilot, like M365 Copilot, if you were to, like I would ask, when is the next time I can meet with Tab? And it would look at my calendar and her calendar, and it would say, you both are free at Wednesday at 3 o'clock. You want me to book a meeting? Yes, please, go ahead and do it. It's using semantic kernel to like figure out what I have access to. If I said, when's the next time that Jason has available for he and I to meet, while the graph technically knows, Jason's calendar, it's not part of my tenant, so I don't have permissions to see it. Maybe he worked here, like he might not have sharing turned on, so he the semantic kernel kind of like is how it knows what you have access to, and it provides that like access through your identity to the information that you have to pull it all together for the LLMs to be able to answer your request. So instrumental to creating like agents, I didn't really do a lot of justice with that. There wasn't a lot of sessions that I saw talking about it. I'm sure there were, but I didn't see it. Cosmos DB is going to gain a lot of prominence in AI solutions in general. So in Build, one of the features that it came out with was built-in vector indexing, which is going to be huge. It already performed really, really well in terms of different data sources for vector stores, but this is going to make it a lot better and pretty low cost as well. Prompt shields and groundedness detection. So data, like safety in AI is like a big concern for everybody. How can you prevent prompt injection? And so there's prompt shields that came out that sort of pre-process the request to see if it's like, hey, you're trying to like jailbreak me or whatever. And then the other thing that we actually found out about this like a couple months ago was that the OpenAI team built a groundedness detection API that you can hit as kind of a secondary request. So you hit your OpenAI service and you say essentially like answer this question using my documents that I provided, and you get a hallucination back, which happens. There's some techniques that you can do in your prompt to prevent that, but you can't prevent it all the time. What they did is they created a groundedness detection API, which you basically say, here's the request, here's the response, was this grounded in my vector database? And it will respond, yes, we found that reference. It's pretty good. It's not perfect. It was like maybe 80-20. But you also have thresholds of like how specific do you want it to be in terms of whether this is grounded or not. So it's not going to be perfect, but it was a really cool tool. I would expect that is going to get, instead of 2 API calls, it'll probably be like reduced to a single one. That question's from the RAG team. I remember that I was talking, so I asked you guys that. Azure Functions, this is pretty cool. You guys use Azure Functions? Lots of people use Azure Functions. So now you'll be able to edit your code directly in there using the link VS Code for the web. So that's coming out. Romy is like an up-and-coming infrastructure as a service framework, and that now has native support. And then this last bullet point came from my team that was asking me about it, and I forgot to put it in the deck, is that for Power Apps developers, Git is coming, and co-authoring is coming. I went and, remember when I said like I went to go see that talk because I had to go ask a question? That was the question. Like, when are they going to actually make Git work for Power Apps? So I'm going to talk that wasn't about that, but to see the person What else do you want to know? I think that's it. Yeah, that's it.
So is the Power App stuff saved as terrible JSON files or terrible XML files?
Yes.
Yes.
As an Azure, as having worked in Azure BDC, you know, I was just expecting terrible, horrible XML.
It's like it's mostly XML and React, right? It's pretty much what it is. It's pretty gross. It's pretty gross stuff. But there's version control now, so
I
like,
mean,
you got that.
that's better than.
And the ability to co-author, I think is like something that's tough. I mean, the project that my Power Apps developers are working on, it's like 15 developers working on a really large Canvas app. And so it's very, very difficult for people to be like, okay, can you let me know when you're done working on the screening so that I can get in there and do my work? So the co-authoring and being able to have source management is really important.
The nice part with Copilots now, you can say, I know I'm missing a comma somewhere in my schema, and you can tell it to find it for you and fix it.
That's true.
Otherwise, you're matching brackets, and then it never works.
I probably missed some stuff that I heard about. So if there's something you heard about at Build and maybe I didn't talk about it today that you thought was cool and worth mentioning, any ideas or any questions about what I went over? I talked to so many people over 3 days, it was ridiculous.
There's a discussion on Meetup, so you can go put your questions there, or you can reach out to me and I can forward that on.
You mentioned it for a minute, but something that I've been looking at is building the Teams extensions and the Copilot Studio extensions, so you can actually extend Copilot as it applies to like Microsoft 365 and build tools and like tasks and actions. Did you have a chance to talk to anyone about that or explore any of that with them?
I didn't get a chance to talk to them directly about it because I didn't feel like it was super necessary. I talked to them about it last year, 2023, and they made it sound like super easy. And I actually did walk through some of the extension examples that they had posted on GitHub. And it was pretty easy to create extensions, but there was no way to like do anything with them. I mean, like in 2023, when they announced it, they were saying, go play with this and build stuff, but you can't actually sell any of it because we don't have a marketplace and that won't be up for a year. So I didn't take it really seriously. The marketplace is up and you can create Copilot extensions. You can create those agents, like those Copilot agents that I showed, in the beginning. That's how it works, is basically you say, at Brian, but instead of a person, it's like at concurrency, like how would I, build an AI app for my company? So that's all like built into the frameworks now in terms of like it's more robust.
Is that how GitHub extensions are built too?
Yeah.
Talk about that. It's the same underlying framework.
I mean, it might not have the same entry points, but essentially it would be the same. I haven't played with it, but I believe that like a lot of that like semantic kernel is going to come into play, how you hook into the Copilot ecosystem.
And you can use semantic kernel to like interact with any of the LLMs. You can go to the Azure instance or OpenAI, and you can then bring your data in from a vector and do all that stuff, or even just more basic stuff. So check out semantic kernel.
Yeah, it really shows that more time preparing some slides for that. But. Any other questions?
This was awesome.